Hey, welcome to the Bible Seminary podcast. I'm your host, Lynn Lewis, president of the Bible Seminary, and we're here today with Krystyna Cawthorne, and we're going to be talking about her new book, The Presence of God in Autism. I'm so glad you're with us today. It's going to be a fun time, and we look forward, Krystyna, to talking with you about your book. Before we dive into the book, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your life maybe here in Katy and even before you got to Katy.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I come from London, as you can probably tell by my accent. I was born to Polish immigrants who came after the Second World War, and they settled in London and had me and my brother. So I was brought up in a bilingual home, speaking Polish till I went to school, and then...
So do you still speak Polish?
I do, but I'm not very fluent because I don't really use it. I spoke it with my family and then, since I moved away. So I'm rusty, but it's there.
Cool.
So, yes, and my parents were very strong with keeping the Polish culture. They sent me to a Polish school on Saturdays, as well as the English school Monday to Friday. So I really grew up bilingual in two cultures. And also a very Catholic culture. They were Catholics. We went to church every Sunday. They sent me to a Catholic elementary school and then to a Catholic secondary school. So in the UK, you don't split middle school and high school. It's all one school, and it's called secondary school. So I went to a Catholic convent all-girls school and was steeped in Catholic tradition, catechisms, teachings. I never was actually exposed to the Bible, but I was exposed to a lot of religion.
So was it good? I mean, did you like it at the time or didn't like it?
No, I didn't like it at the time. I must admit, I found it a little boring. Being a teenager, I didn't want to go to an all-girls school. But looking back, it was probably wise that I did go to an all-girls school till the age of 18. But I graduated at the age of 18 and went to college, and I left the church. And I did not look back. So I did a bachelor's degree in modern languages at the University of Westminster, as it is called now. And that was in French and Spanish. And that is where I met my husband. I was a freshman, he was a senior. And I met him at the French club where the seniors were welcoming the freshmen. I think they were looking for freshman girls, but that's how we met.
That's how you met.
That is how we met, out. Yes. So I graduated from there with my bachelor's degree in French and Spanish, and I went on to grad school to do a business school to do export marketing and languages. It was a postgraduate diploma. And then I went into my career, which was sales and marketing. My first job was with a seafood company. My markets were Spain and France, because those were the language that I spoke. I did a lot of traveling. At that point, we got married, so I moved back to London, and I worked for a toiletries company in charge of Europe. And then I went to Electrolux for 7 years. And along that point in 1989, we had Natalie. And soon after we had Natalie, my husband was headhunted, and we moved to the north of England for a couple of years in Manchester. So I did a bit of freelance work just to supplement the house income, and was raising Natalie. And I think that was God's providence. My husband was relocated here to Houston to head the international marketing campaign for the head office that he was working for in the UK. We were all very excited. It was thrilling. It was like winning the lottery. Came here, lovely big houses, swimming pool.
When was that? What year?
That was, let me think. So 1996.
Okay.
1996, that's it. We came here in 1996. And yeah, life was good. I did some freelance work for sales and marketing, and then I kind of moved into substitute teaching because my daughter was going through grade school, and I wanted to kind of understand the American school system because I hadn't been brought up in an American school system, and through her, I was learning a lot. And we decided to add to our family, and along came Marcus in 1999, and he was a lovely baby boy and typically developing like for the first 12 months, as far as we could tell. I mean, we had no exposure to autism. We wouldn't have recognized red flags even if they were there. He seemed very typically developing, communicative, saying mama and dada. We saw nothing wrong. Then between 12 months and 24 months, things began to change. Maybe not so obvious to us parents, but definitely to people on the outside. Like my family in England, when I traveled over there, they certainly noticed that things were not quite what they should be. He did have a very adverse reaction at 18 months to his MMR, but I think that just exacerbated something that was already happening. Then at the age of 24 months, he had his 2-year checkup, and the pediatrician said, he's not talking, he's not reacting, he needs to be tested. And he was tested by Project Tyke. And they didn't give him a diagnosis because they were not in a position to give a diagnosis, but they said he was severely developmentally delayed. And he started to develop behaviors like perseveration of looking at things at the side of his eyes, not talking, withdrawing, temper tantrums, kind of started to disappear. His whole personality started to disappear. And then around 3 years old in Texas Children's Hospital, he was officially diagnosed with severe autism. And we were told, as of now, there is no cure. It's a lifelong disorder. However, there are lots of treatments to help. But that's how we came to that point.
So when you got to that point, you were not a Christian.
I was not a Christian.
So tell us a little bit about that journey, what brought you to Christ then?
Yes, I was not a Christian, so I was just steeped in how can I help Marcus? I read anything I could read. I did any research I could do. Autism really became the idol of my life. Everything focused on it. I'm ashamed to say I neglected the rest of my family. I was up at night researching, and there were some good therapies out there, but you had to set them up and give so much time to it. I know my daughter at the time confided to my grandparents that she had lost her mother to autism. I was lost. I wanted to fix Marcus. I thought there must be a way, but it was ever elusive. Then the year 2002, a friend of mine called me, and she told me that she had recently become a Christian. She was a British friend of mine, so I'd known her as a British expat before she became a Christian. And I didn't really know what she meant by I've become a Christian. So I said, okay, good for you. I'm happy for you. I didn't fully understand what that meant. So she said, Krystyna, would you like to come over for a prayer meeting? And I said, no, absolutely not. I felt, no. I said, that's not for me. I'm sorry. I'm happy for you. But she didn't give up. She called again maybe a few months later, and she said she needed some clothes because she was going on a mission trip to South America, and she needed some kids' clothes. Did Marcus have any clothes that I could donate? I said, yeah, absolutely. So I went over there, and we were chatting, and she started to explain the gospel to me. I must admit, I felt quite kind of irritated at first. I felt she was proselytizing, and, I'm glad this makes you happy, but,
leave me alone.
Leave me alone. I was feeling very sorry for myself at the time. I was full of self-pity, and she said, okay. She said, here's some books. Why don't you read some books? And I, feeling sorry for myself, said, I don't have time to read books. I don't have time to read books. I am so busy taking care of Marcus. Woe is me, you know. But I took them, and there were a pile of books, and I can't remember the name of the book on the top, but it had this picture of a crown of thorns and a drop of blood. And I don't know what it was, but it really pierced my heart. I mean, it stopped me in my tracks. So I agreed to take the books home, muttering away that, I haven't got time to read these. But I did have time. I read one after the other, after the other. There were 6 books, and it was all about the gospel, people coming to Christ, how their lives changed miraculously, what Jesus Christ had done for us, died for us, our sins are forgiven, how people's lives had changed and some of the experiences they had. And I remember thinking, why had nobody ever told me this before? I mean, I grew up in religion. I mean, this is awesome stuff. And then it was the very last book on the last page where there was a big prayer of salvation. And I read it out loud in my backyard. I was ready, and it was a beautiful prayer. And I read it out loud. As it happened, I was alone at home, which doesn't often happen, but I was. And I felt the fire of the Holy Spirit just come through me. And I just fell on my knees, and I started praying and praising. And I had this next door neighbor who was kind of looking over the fence thinking, oh, wow, this autism lady is definitely cracked. But it was a physical feeling, and my life changed. After that, it literally changed.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you talk about this in the book, and we'll get to a little bit more of that. But you mentioned the word autism, and I think the official term is autism spectrum disorder.
Yes.
So you're in a great challenge that you're living through, and then now you find somebody, Jesus, that can help. But talk a little bit more about autism spectrum. Like, what does that mean? What is that? How do you define that? What is it?
Right. Well, autism spectrum disorder describes a wide range of complex neurodevelopmental difficulties that affect individuals' everyday lives. It presents itself in repetitive behaviors, characteristic type of behaviors, specifically inability to communicate and social interaction. It depends at what end of the spectrum
So they
you
call
are.
it a spectrum because different people have different.
Yeah. I mean, at the top end of the spectrum, which is usually is the Asperger's or high-functioning autism spectrum, an individual is typically developed, typically functioning, but has significant difficulties in communicating and relating, picking up on social cues. They're very concrete, and therefore it makes it very difficult for them to fit in.
Right.
So even though they're very high functioning, they still struggle. Then at the other end, you'll have individuals that need a huge amount of support. They're nonverbal, they have minimal functioning abilities. In my experience, most come somewhere in between. I would put Marcus kind of middle to the low. I mean, he's verbal and he can communicate, but he communicates only what he wants to communicate. Right. He cannot converse.
It's not interaction.
It's not interaction. It's just wants, needs, and his obsessions. But he is verbal. Yeah, I mean, cognitively, he's probably between ages of 4 and 6. You know, in some areas he's better than others.
So with the family, I mean, you got Natalie, you got your husband, you, and what were the struggles that y'all were facing? I mean, you have now Marcus. First couple of years seemed to be pretty normal, but then what came from all this behaviors or lack of behaviors?
Yeah. Well, once he was diagnosed and we knew what we were dealing with, although the behaviors had already started.
there,
Yeah, they were already there. We just didn't know what they are. It impacts the family completely. It's night and day. He needed care 24/7. His behaviors were out of control. He was young. He was immature. He didn't understand all the processing. So it really manifested in very aggressive behaviors. And it was constant. He didn't sleep at night. He needed constant supervision. He needed feeding. He needed washing, bathing like a baby. But probably the most difficult part was the aggression that it would lead to. I mean, he was in the school district at the time, and they certainly have great services. But when he reached the age of 6, his behaviors had spiraled so much out of control that they couldn't handle him. They wouldn't allow him on a school bus because the school buses used to come to the house to pick him up. And the bus driver that had been doing it, she just said, I'm not taking him on the bus anymore because he's too aggressive. So I had to drive him to the school. And then he would be carried in, kicking and screaming. He broke a paraprofessional's nose. And that's all I'm hearing. And I'm thinking, well, this is the end of the road. I don't know what to do anymore.
And at this point, you mentioned in the book, they were calling him the most challenging child in the district. Yeah.
Yes, he had that infamous title of being the most challenging child in the district. It was a much smaller district than in the smaller autism population, but definitely he was.
So in your home caretaking, you were already figuring out how to deal with it, and now you're trying to get him into a system, and they're trying to figure out what to do. So y'all are actually all struggling with how do you handle someone. What did that do to the family? I mean, you talked about Natalie. She said she basically lost her parents, but I mean, you're not like going places together. Somebody's always got to be at home, or are you taking Marcus out, or how does that impact everybody?
Yeah, well, when he was little, I mean, we basically just, he would go to school and he would come home. So it was all hands-on Marcus,
Right.
All of it. I mean, my husband goes out to work, and Natalie was going to junior high school. So, I would have to take care of him. I did actually join a Bible study at that time because he was going to a morning program, and that helped a lot. That was my first exposure. But I'd already been saved, and that was my first exposure. And it really, really helped. But the onus was on me because Natalie goes to school and my husband goes to work. Yes, and it was constant. He had to be shadowed constantly. You can't leave him alone in the room. You don't know what he's going to do. He wants this, he wants that. He has a meltdown. You can't go shopping. You can't really do much.
Can't do what we call normal life.
No.
Just not enough sleep, being tired.
No.
Just all those things that are part of the normal flow were interrupted.
Yeah. Initially, it was probably the toughest times until God started to intervene.
And you talk about the fact that the Bible Seminary where you enrolled, and in fact got a Bible certificate, did that program, then enrolled in the master's program. So the Bible Seminary is actually part of your journey with Marcus. So tell us a little about that journey. So you're saved, Marcus is getting some assistance, or you're figuring it out. How did the Bible Seminary, what was that journey like for you?
Well, yes. I mean, I hadn't planned to come to the Bible Seminary. I knew it was there and it really attracted me. I just didn't think I was a typical candidate for the Bible Seminary. But I think God was already working in this, because at that time I was teaching a small group of mums with special needs, a Bible study, and I'd invited Paul Helvig to come and talk to us during the summer months, and that's how we reconnected. Then I felt it was time for me to move on, and I asked him and said, I'm looking for some really in-depth, Bible study, theological training. I feel I really need that. And as it happened, he said, come and audit my discipleship class. It starts next week. It was the perfect hours, worked with school hours. And I was like, wow, thank you. I was a little bit in awe. I didn't feel I was a typical Bible seminary candidate. But I went and I absolutely loved it. And after that, I took a class with Paul, a Bible study methods class for credit. And I thought, well, if I could do credit, then maybe I can do 2 classes for credit. So I spread to 2 classes for credit, and then the rest is history. So throughout that journey, I came to do a core class called Spiritual Formation. I didn't even know what spiritual formation class meant, but it was your class. And it was a great class, but your assignment was to create a ministry tool that you can give to someone else and they can use it. So a self-contained ministry tool. And you gave a whole list of assignments. And I looked through those list of assignments and all kinds of things, the presentations, videos, Bible study, sermon. And I just didn't know what to choose. So I left it and I prayed about it. I said, God, what do you want me to do? And it must have been maybe 2 or 3 days later. I was just doing some chores, errands at home. I was making bed. And the whole idea of this just flooded. I just flooded. It was a Holy Spirit God thing. It just flooded. A Bible study guide for mums walking the journey that you walk.
Which is exactly where you were.
Which is exactly where I was. And once that idea hit me, the ideas didn't stop flowing. I mean, I literally stopped what I was doing. I went and sat on my desk and I just started writing, just initial writing, and chapter after chapter after chapter. And we were using verses from Exodus and Matthew because they were the ones set for that class, but they were ideal. And my own personal stories came pouring out from other moms also, and it just came together as an assignment. It just poured out. I just felt this is what God wants me to do. But at that point, it was an assignment. I wanted to get a good grade, and I thought, oh, I hope I get a good grade for this. I just wrote, and then we had to do a presentation for this. And I remember doing the presentation, and I remember you saying that you really liked it, that perhaps we should develop it into something more, which was thrilling. I was so excited. I never thought it would happen.
And then that process then moved towards your capstone project. So tell us about that.
Yes, well, it came to the end of my journey at the Bible Seminary, and all that was left was my capstone or thesis. And once again, I was thinking, I don't know what to do. Dr. Stripling gave me some theses ideas, but I kept coming back to this. I kept thinking, I would really like to expand on this, especially the biblical exegetical stuff in the first part of each chapter, and then connect it to contemporary life applications, especially autism. And that grew with your help, because I sent you every chapter when I wrote it, and you helped with that to build it up into a capstone project. And then Dr. Stripling asked me to label in each part how each class helped me to get to that point. That was very easy. I went through every class, how it helped me write about this, how it helped me to do the exegesis, how to help me to get to Greek word roots, the theologies I had learned, the church history. It just all came together to help with the biblical part of this book.
Yep. And then in the design, you did that. I mean, you have the design of each chapter. There's 10 chapters. And so you have a biblical exposition part in the beginning, and then practical application, telling stories and applications, and then you end each chapter asking some questions. How did you come up with those topics? There's 10 chapters. What led to the kind of the topic choices?
Yeah, I think that was, once again, if we go back to the original assignment, and it was just flowing, and the first chapter deals with misery and hope. Well, I was walking a path of misery, just as the Israelites were in Egypt under their harsh taskmasters.
The Bible doesn't seem as foreign when you're living
Right.
out things very similar to what they experienced.
Right.
Yeah.
And they cried out to the Lord in their bondage, and the Lord remembered his covenant. And I remember after that terrible experience with Marcus breaking his teacher's nose, how I just fell down on my knees and cried out to the Lord. So I connected with that. And so he explained how the Lord remembered his covenant. So then I applied it to, after I cried out to the Lord, that he remembered me. He set things in motion, which he probably had set in motion before time began.
Yep.
But I tangibly started to see them happen, just like the Israelites did when, they came out of Exodus. So Misery and Hope is the first chapter, deliverance, where they were delivered out of Exodus. I began to see my deliverance, my salvation, people being brought into my life, helping me deliver the Marcus situation, which was dire.
Yep.
It was dire. His future wasn't looking good. His future was, we may have to put him in institution under medication for who knows how long. But that didn't happen. People came into our lives. So that's chapter 2, deliverance. Presence, I think, is the next chapter. So the Israelites have the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of light by night, leading them. And that's how I felt that Jesus had come into my life and also was present and leading me. Of course, I didn't see him the way the Israelites did.
Right.
And I struggled the way the Israelites did, where they would grumble if things went wrong. I did too, but I just saw that analogy and could apply it to how things progressed and how more people were being brought in. And I could see how God had created situations, put people together just to walk on that path of deliverance. The Israelites were in the wilderness, but they had provision. They had manna from heaven, wonderful manna from heaven. Well, God poured out provision on me with my journey. And I talk about it in more detail, how provision was coming out of everywhere just by trusting him. And then there was a testing in the timing in the first part of the book, which is Exodus. Testing is a great thing. I mean, the Israelites were God's chosen nation, and he was providing manna, but he stopped providing water, and they were really, really thirsty. So he allowed them to go through trials and tribulations, only to bring them out again. And that's how I felt. Trials and tribulations didn't stop, but time and time again, he would provide that water, the water of life. Jesus is the water of life. And I love the one on timing. Timing is a great thing. I mean, there was Moses, at 80, given his, commission, but he didn't know what or where or when. And I can apply that to my life, the timing, or anybody's life. In fact, my daughter who edited this book, she said it really ministered to her, and she loved the bit about timing.
Good.
And she said, it's not just Marcus, it's just a general thing about timing. And then the second part of the book, which is the book of Matthew, where we talk about comfort, rest, faith, and forgiveness. And I love the Matthew scriptures in every single chapter. And it's how to apply it with the life of autism. And there's stories, there's anecdotes, there's things that happened to me and to other people, other autism mums who very kindly formed a focus group and gave me a lot of info. And with their permission, I have quoted some of the things. That
you actually worked with them to help do the writing, get some of the stories. They help preview it and work through it, so that's good. Well, thank you for talking. We're going to take a short little break in just a moment, and we'll come back and talk more about Krystyna's book, The Presence of God and Autism.
At this moment on the campus of the Bible Seminary, we are cultivating biblical leaders that are rooted in the Word.
I love the Bible Seminary because of the focus on the inerrant Word of God.
I came to the Bible Seminary out of a desire to know the Bible.
Whether you're a ministry leader, college or high school student, pastor, or simply have a desire to learn the Word of God, there's room for you at the Bible Seminary.
Scott Stripling. I'm speaking to you from the museum exhibit of Joshua, Judges, and Jesus at the Bible Seminary. Go online and schedule your tour group to come. You can do that by going to TheBibleSeminary.edu/3J. I hope to see you here soon at Joshua, Judges, and Jesus.
Welcome back to the Bible Seminary podcast. I'm Lynn Lewis, and we're with Krystyna Cawthorne talking about her book, The Presence of God in Autism. Krystyna, was the book difficult to write? I mean, you're sharing your personal journey, you're sharing private information, you're sharing stories about a very difficult journey that you had. So when you're actually writing it, was it difficult? Was it relieving? Did God use it? I mean, what was the process?
I think all of the above. It was difficult. It was very emotional.
Yeah.
It was very cathartic. I cried a lot. And in fact, my husband has read this book and he said it brought back a lot of memories for him and made him cry. So yes. But I felt it was necessary. It was cleansing. And I just really wanted to share the stories because how often God intervened in these really difficult situations. But I also didn't want to minimize what the autism journey is. I wanted to be as candid as possible because it's not an easy journey. And I know it can be glamorized a little bit on TV and on Facebook and romanticized. And it is a beautiful journey. And these people are beautiful people, but the daily life challenges are tough. And it's a question of survival for many, many families and very, very difficult. So I wanted the balance of communicating the reality of autism, but also balance it with how, if you have Jesus walking by your side, you know, he helps the journey. I mean, one of the chapters is Matthew 11:28, come to me, all you who are heavy burdened. I felt that a lot, that yoke, that the more I give up of these burdens and these difficulties, I can carry on, I can walk.
So who's your target audience? So when you're writing it in the book, so who's it specifically aimed at?
So I started out with specifically aiming moms with children with autism or on the autism spectrum. And the reason for that is because I'm a mom who has a kid on the autism spectrum. So I feel I understand what autism is. I understand the problems, the challenges of autism, as well as the rewards. And I have many mom friends who also have shared their journeys. And I feel I could really connect with them, especially in their isolation, their exhaustion, and point them to Jesus Christ. But since then, I did talk about this on Facebook, and I have had dads come up to me and say, you know, we walk through these things too. And I liked your book. I connected. And I said, well, that's great. I just felt maybe a man should write what a man's journey is, because it's different, you know, a husband and work.
But the book actually is helpful for, you mentioned for your daughter, she's reading part of it, so she's part of the family, your husband's part of this family. What about people who don't have anybody with autism? Is the book helpful at all to them in any way?
Yeah. Well, I think what I've learned is just the little bit that the book's out there, because I've gifted some people and I put it on Facebook, so a few people have bought it, is I think it helps everyone, not just mums with autism, fathers with autism, siblings with autism, friends with autism, acquaintances with autism, educators. I had quite a few educators thanking me for this because they want to understand what families with autism go through, even though they teach their kids, you know, unless you do it, you don't know what it's like. So it helped them. So paraprofessionals and anyone who would like to minister to a family with autism but doesn't know where to start. I'm hoping that would help.
And you actually include in the back of the book a section of do's and don'ts. So
Yeah.
what was that about?
Well, that was kind of a basic do's and don'ts, and it was based on some of my own personal experience and other moms that shared with me that, yeah, I mean, a mom with autism needs friendship, they're isolated, needs support, needs help. Don't feel awkward about the kid. If you don't know, ask. They love to talk about them. Inject a sense of humor, help. Any practical advice like doctors, dentists, because this is a whole other nightmare. You know, I mean, typical dentists can't handle these things. So that kind of information is great. Don'ts are a little bit like people that just may not understand. They may have just seen the Rain Man and think, well, all people with autism are like the Rain Man. Well, they're not. You know, I mean, he was a savant. He was brilliant. So, and unless you're an expert or, you know, in the profession, perhaps not offer advice. I mean, I've been offered advice often about, you know, have you tried a different diet? Have you tried essential oils? I mean, you know, his problems are so big. Essential oils or a diet makes very little impact. And yes, I have tried these things, and a lot of parents try everything. They just try everything.
So in the middle of all that, and you've written the book obviously to help people, is there something that you would say is like the key thing that would encourage people, to give people hope that are in the situation? So maybe to moms with autism or families that have someone on the autism spectrum, what would you say you might be the key thing that would be the most helpful and encouraging?
I think the key thing that would be most helpful and encouraging is if you want to minister to someone who has a child with autism or family and you don't know where to start, just get to know them, visit them, offer help, offer maybe taking care of the kid, finding out about the kid, pray with them. People like to be prayed for even if they're not believers. If you feel appropriate, share the gospel, share the Jesus, and just provide support and take their lead. A lot of practical support to begin with, and then maybe bring in, you know, the gospel and Jesus and prayer and, you know, that kind of thing.
You talk about your journey in that God was doing things through other people in situations that would just bless you out of the blue, and that was part of what gave you hope, not only in the gospel, but hope for Marcus in your situation.
Yes.
So prayer does actually do things for people, even if you're not directly involved.
Yes. Well, I think one of the biggest answers to my prayer was when I fell on my knees, desperate, was very soon after this new teacher came into his life out of nowhere. The Exley Elementary was opened up with a new autism unit, and there was a young teacher who applied for the job, and the autism administration said to her, you can have the job provided you go and visit a young man, and if you still think you want that job, and the young man was Marcus, the job is yours. And she did. She went to visit him. They fell in love, or she fell in love with him, and she took the job, and she was his teacher for 11 years, and she implemented some of the most imaginative behavior intervention strategies that literally turned Marcus around. He's not perfect. He has his ups and downs. But from where he was to where he is, this was a direct answer of prayer from God. And this benefited so many other families because once she left the school district, she decided to open a special needs camp because she recognized that these children regressed in the summer months. She saw that in Marcus and others. And it started off with just her, Marcus, and 2 other kids, and they went and pitched up a tent, and it's now a big special needs camp for lots of families. Plus, she runs a day program. So that prayer, and God was working, just brought this young teacher together with this child that nobody wanted, and I feel created something beautiful.
Yeah. And the cover of the book depicts that, because he actually was able to graduate.
He
And
was.
she was a key part of that, and still is a key part of his experience after graduation too.
Absolutely.
It's a celebration of God's
Absolutely.
work and what He's done in your family and through Marcus's life.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are still good days and bad days. I'm not saying that, However, from where he was and what his destiny appeared to be, or at least what the enemy had for him, has transformed completely with the people that he's brought into his life, and Suzette and others. He is stable, he's content, he has his moments, but he's living a happy life in his world, where I seriously considered at one point that an institution would be the only place to place him because of his behaviors. I mean, he's very violent, but no, there he is.
And he's smiling.
And he's
also,
smiling, and he's happy.
It's interesting. C.S. Lewis years ago said something about God whispers to us in our pleasure, but He shouts to us in our pains. And you really seem to have come to Christ through that, and then learned in many ways how God can work through your situation to redeem it, to give hope. And as you've written this, it's an excellent book.
With your help.
Well, thank you for writing it. It was your life that we're exposing and sharing here. And I think the way that you share the stories, the way that you've gotten people involved, I think God really does show His redemptive power, His grace, His ability to get into anybody's life and situation and bring good out of it, no matter what it is.
Right.
And I think you've been able to share that, and some of the other stories of other people, talking about their same journeys.
Yes.
It's also beautiful to see those, but also painful, because you're writing about, as you say, very difficult things. So, well, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. I don't know if we have any questions at all from our audience, but we are so pleased to have the opportunity to share the book, The Presence of God in Autism. We thank you all for watching today. And you can find Krystyna's book on Amazon. It's available in paperback or in digital form, Kindle book. You can also go to nehemiahpress.com. That's the Bible Seminary's publishing arm. And we thank you for coming today and joining us on the Bible Seminary podcast. I'm your host, Lynn Lewis, and we look forward to seeing you next time.